What if I told you that August could be one of the most important months for your coneflowers, and that some of the things gardeners commonly do during this month may actually work against the plant? When summer reaches its hottest stretch, many gardeners see fading flowers, tired-looking leaves, leaning stems, and dry soil, and immediately think their coneflowers need to be cut back, fertilized, or watered constantly. But coneflowers are tougher and more interesting than that. August isn't simply the month when your summer flowers start coming to an end. It's a time when coneflowers can still be actively flowering, supporting pollinators, developing seeds, and maintaining the energy reserves they need for the seasons ahead. Welcome back to Daily Garden Gate, where we talk about practical gardening techniques, overlooked plant secrets, and simple ways to get more from the garden you already have. Today, we're focusing entirely on coneflowers and the things they need during August. We're going to look at watering, sunlight, soil, deadheading, mulch, pollinators, seed heads, pruning, and several mistakes that can quietly weaken your plants. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why August isn't the time to panic when your coneflowers begin looking a little different. The big August mistake. Let's begin with the mistake I see gardeners make over and over again, treating every fading coneflower flower as if it were a problem that needs to be removed immediately. A flower starts losing its bright color, the petals begin to droop, and out come the pruning shears. Before long, the entire plant has been trimmed simply because some of its flowers weren't looking fresh anymore. But a fading flower isn't necessarily a failed flower. It's often simply entering the next stage of its natural life cycle. After attracting pollinators, the flower can begin developing seeds. That seed head can eventually become useful to birds and can also provide structure and interest in the garden later in the season. So before you remove every faded flower, decide what you're trying to accomplish. If you want to encourage additional blooms, selective deadheading can be useful. If you want to support wildlife or collect seeds, leaving some flower heads alone makes more sense. The important point is that there isn't one rule that says every coneflower must be treated exactly the same way. What your coneflower actually needs. The answer is much simpler than many gardening products would have you believe. Your plant needs suitable sunlight, reasonable moisture level, good drainage, adequate space, and healthy growing conditions. It doesn't necessarily need a special August fertilizer. It doesn't need to be cut down simply because summer is getting older, and it definitely doesn't need to be constantly watered just because temperatures are high. Coneflowers are generally resilient perennials, and established plants can tolerate periods of dry weather. But drought tolerance doesn't mean that water is never necessary. During prolonged heat or drought, even a tough plant can experience stress. The key is learning to distinguish between a plant that genuinely needs water and one that is simply growing through a normal seasonal transition. Watering in August. Watering is one of the most important things to get right. If your coneflowers are established and your garden is receiving regular rainfall, you may not need to water them frequently. But if your area is experiencing a prolonged dry spell, check the soil before making a decision. When watering is necessary, aim for deep watering rather than constant shallow sprinkling. A quick splash may wet the surface while leaving the deeper root zone dry. Slow, thorough watering allows moisture to move farther down into the soil, encouraging roots to make use of a deeper moisture reserve. After watering, give the soil time to dry appropriately. Coneflowers generally don't appreciate constantly saturated conditions. Their roots need access to air as well as water. If soil remains wet for long periods, the problem isn't necessarily that your plant needs more water. It may actually need better drainage. This simple soil check. You don't need complicated equipment to start understanding your garden's moisture level. Simply check the soil near the plant. Push your finger into the soil carefully and feel what is happening below the surface. If the soil is dry and the weather has been hot and rainless, your coneflower may benefit from watering. If the soil is already moist, adding more water just because it's August may accomplish very little. This is an important gardening habit because plants don't follow calendars. Your coneflower doesn't know that it's August 12th or August 20th. It responds to moisture, temperature, sunlight, roots, and its overall environment. Instead of asking, "Is it time to water?" ask, "Does this plant actually need water right now?" That small change in thinking can make your gardening much more effective. Newly planted coneflowers need extra attention. There's an important difference between an established coneflower and one you planted recently. A mature plant may have a well-developed root system that can access moisture deeper in the soil. A newly planted coneflower hasn't had as much time to establish itself. If you planted coneflowers recently and August is hot and dry, pay closer attention to soil moisture. Don't allow a young transplant to experience prolonged severe dryness simply because you've heard that coneflowers are drought tolerant. At the same time, don't keep the soil permanently soaked. The goal is consistent establishment, not constant saturation. Once the plant becomes established, you can generally reduce the amount of attention it needs. This is one of the great advantages of perennial flowers. Once they settle into the right location, they can become remarkably self-sufficient. Don't over-fertilize. Now let's talk about fertilizer, because this is another area where gardeners can easily overdo it. When a plant looks tired in August, it's tempting to assume that it must be hungry. But a coneflower growing in reasonably fertile soil usually doesn't need to be pushed with heavy fertilizer simply because summer is progressing. Too much fertilizer can encourage excessive vegetative growth and may not solve the actual problem. If your coneflowers are flowering, growing normally, and generally healthy, there's no reason to panic because they aren't producing the same fresh spring growth you saw earlier. Instead of reaching immediately for fertilizer, examine the growing conditions. Is the soil dry? Is the plant getting enough sunlight? Is it crowded? Has something changed around it? Finding the actual cause is almost always better than throwing fertilizer at the symptom. Sunlight is a major factor. Coneflowers generally perform best in sunny locations. If your plants receive plenty of sunlight, they have the energy they need to produce strong growth and abundant flowers. But gardens change. Trees grow taller. Shrubs become wider. Nearby plants become larger. A location that was sunny when you first planted your coneflowers may no longer receive the same amount of direct sunlight. August is an excellent time to notice this because the garden is fully developed. Look at the plants during different parts of the day. Is another plant casting a large shadow over them? Are they receiving significantly less sunlight than they did when they were first planted? If you discover a major sunlight problem, don't necessarily rush to transplant a stressed plant during the hottest part of summer. Instead, identify the issue and plan your garden adjustments for a more suitable time. Airflow and crowding. Sunlight isn't the only thing to consider. Air movement matters too. When plants become extremely crowded, moisture can remain trapped around the foliage for longer after rain or watering. Dense growth can also make it harder to inspect the plant for problems. Coneflowers look beautiful when planted in groups, so you don't need to leave enormous gaps between every plant. But overcrowding can become an issue when plants have expanded significantly beyond their original space. If your coneflowers are packed tightly against other perennials, observe whether they're competing for space. You may decide that future division or relocation would improve the garden. For now, focus on keeping the planting area reasonably open and removing obvious competing weeds. Now let's answer the biggest question. Should you deadhead coneflowers in August? The answer depends on your goal. If you want to encourage additional flowering, removing selected spent flowers can help maintain a fresher appearance and may encourage the plant to produce more blooms, depending on the variety and conditions. But you don't have to remove every flower head. Leaving some spent flowers allows them to mature into seed heads. Those seed heads can provide food for birds later and they add structure to the garden. This means you can use a strategy called selective deadheading. Remove some of the oldest flowers while leaving others to develop naturally. It's a simple compromise that can give you continued blooms while preserving some of the wildlife value of the plant. Don't cut everything down. This is perhaps the most important warning in today's video. Don't automatically cut the entire coneflower plant down in August. If the plant is still actively growing, its foliage is still contributing to photosynthesis. The stems may still contain flowers that haven't opened. Some flower heads may be developing seeds. A complete cutback can remove healthy plant material that the plant is still using. If one stem is damaged or clearly finished, deal with that individual stem. If some flowers are fading, selectively head dead them if that's your goal. But there's a big difference between maintenance and completely removing a healthy plant's summer growth. Why leaving some flowers matters. There's something fascinating about allowing part of your garden to complete its natural cycle. When a coneflower first opens, it attracts pollinators. Later, the flower changes. The petals fade, the central cone becomes more prominent, and seeds begin developing. That mature flower head isn't simply a dead object. It's part of the plant's reproductive process. And once you begin looking at the garden this way, you may become less tempted to remove everything the moment it stops looking perfect. The garden isn't supposed to look exactly the same every week. Its changing appearance is part of what makes it a living ecosystem. Pollinators love coneflowers. Coneflowers are especially valuable in gardens designed with pollinators in mind. Their flowers can attract bees, butterflies, and other beneficial insects. So before head deading, take a moment to look at the flower. Is something visiting it? If bees or butterflies are actively feeding, you may want to leave that flower alone a little longer. This doesn't mean you can never head dead. It simply means that timing matters. A flower that is still actively serving pollinators has more value than one that has completely finished blooming. A wildlife-friendly garden isn't necessarily one where everything is perfectly trimmed. Sometimes the most useful garden is the one that provides flowers, seeds, stems, shelter, and different resources throughout the seasons. Watch the leaves. August is also the perfect time to inspect coneflower foliage. Don't panic over every imperfect leaf. By late summer, plants have experienced weeks of heat, sunlight, rainfall, wind, insects, and normal aging. Some leaves may naturally look less vibrant than they did earlier. Instead, look for unusual patterns. Are large sections of foliage suddenly changing? Are there damaged areas spreading rapidly? Is the plant wilting even though the soil is moist? Are stems collapsing unexpectedly? Observation helps you distinguish normal seasonal change from a genuine problem. And remember, you don't need to remove every imperfect leaf. A garden plant doesn't need to look like a photograph to be healthy. Mulch your coneflowers correctly. Mulch can be helpful around coneflowers, especially during hot and dry weather. Organic mulch can help reduce evaporation, moderate soil temperature, and suppress weeds. But there is one mistake you should avoid: piling mulch directly against the base of the plant. Instead, keep the immediate crown and base reasonably clear while using mulch around the surrounding soil. You don't need an enormous mountain of mulch. A moderate layer can provide benefits without creating an excessively damp environment around the plant's base. Good mulch management is about balance. Keep weeds under control. August weeds can become surprisingly aggressive. They're competing with your coneflowers for water, nutrients, sunlight, and space. Removing weeds while they're small is much easier than waiting until they've matured and produce seeds. Take a few minutes during your garden walks to remove obvious competitors around your coneflowers. But remember that not every wild plant is automatically a problem. Some spontaneous plants may provide benefits to wildlife. The question is whether a particular plant is competing aggressively with your coneflowers or occupying a location where you don't want it. Gardening is about managing the ecosystem, not necessarily eliminating every plant you didn't personally purchase. Check your coneflower stems. Look closely at the stems in August. Some may be strong and upright. Others may lean under the weight of flowers or after heavy rain. Leaning doesn't automatically mean something is wrong. Coneflowers can have a natural, relaxed appearance as the season progresses. If stems repeatedly fall across walkways or smother neighboring plants, you can consider support, but don't feel obligated to make every stem perfectly vertical. A slightly swaying coneflower often looks more natural than one held rigidly in place. Don't chase perfection. One of the biggest lessons in gardening is learning to accept some imperfection. Your August garden won't look exactly like the garden center display from early summer. Leaves may have blemishes, petals may fade, stems may lean, seed heads may appear. That doesn't mean your garden is failing. In fact, these changes can be signs that the plant is progressing naturally through its seasonal cycle. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is healthy growth, beautiful flowers, useful habitat, and a garden that continues returning year after year. Soil drainage matters. If your coneflowers repeatedly struggle, take a serious look at the soil. Coneflowers generally appreciate well-drained conditions. If water sits around their roots for long periods, the plant can experience stress. This is why the location you choose can matter more than any fertilizer you purchase. If you're creating a new coneflower bed, think about drainage, sunlight, and soil structure before planting. If you're working with heavy soil, improving it gradually with appropriate organic matter can help create a better environment over time. Healthy soil is the foundation beneath everything happening above ground. Don't forget the roots. When you're admiring a coneflower, it's easy to focus entirely on the flowers. But beneath the soil is a system that supports the entire plant. Roots respond to moisture, oxygen, temperature, soil structure, and competition. Every time you water, you're affecting that environment. Every time you add fertilizer, you're affecting it. Every time you disturb the soil, you're affecting it. That's why good gardening isn't just about making the flowers look impressive. It's about creating conditions where the roots can function properly. A strong root system gives the plant a much better foundation for handling summer stress and preparing for future growth. What to do during a heat wave? If August brings an unusually intense heat wave, change your approach slightly. Check young plants more frequently. Monitor soil moisture. Water deeply when necessary. Avoid unnecessary transplanting and major root disturbance during extreme heat. If your established coneflowers look slightly stressed during a brief hot spell, don't immediately assume they're dying. Plants have their own ways of responding to environmental stress. Give them suitable conditions and monitor them. The important thing is to avoid making several dramatic changes at once. Don't suddenly heavily fertilize, prune aggressively, and flood the soil because the plant looks different during a heat wave. Sometimes the best response is simply appropriate water and patience. Another common mistake is thinking that August means the garden is basically finished. But coneflowers can continue contributing to the garden well beyond their peak flowering period. Depending on your climate and variety, they may continue producing flowers, attracting insects, and developing seed heads. And even after flowering declines, their structure can remain useful. So don't look at August as the end. Think of it as a transition. The garden is moving from one stage into another. The value of seed heads. If you leave some coneflower flowers to mature, you'll eventually see the familiar central cone become more prominent. Those seed heads can be valuable to birds and can also provide winter interest. Many gardeners make the mistake of removing them because they think the garden has become messy. But if your goal is to create a garden that supports wildlife, those messy elements can actually be some of the most useful. You don't have to leave every plant completely untouched. Simply allow some seed heads to remain. That small decision can make your garden more valuable to wildlife. A better way to think about pruning. Instead of asking, when should I cut my coneflowers, ask 3 questions. First, is the material healthy? Second, what do I want the plant to do next? Third, is removing this growth actually helping me achieve that goal? If the answer is no, don't cut it simply because the calendar says it's time. This approach works for many garden plants, not just coneflowers. Pruning should have a purpose. The August walkthrough. Here's a simple routine you can use every time you walk through your garden this month. Start by looking at the flowers. Are new blooms appearing? Are older flowers fading? Are pollinators visiting? Then look at the foliage. Does it generally look healthy? Are there unusual changes? Next, check the soil. Is it dry, moist, waterlogged? Then inspect the surrounding area. Are weeds competing with the plant? Has another perennial become too large? Has a tree begun shading the coneflower? Finally, decide whether any action is actually necessary. Sometimes you'll water, sometimes you'll deadhead, sometimes you'll remove a weed, and sometimes you'll simply walk away. That last option is perfectly acceptable. August coneflower checklist. Let's make this extremely simple. Number 1, check moisture before watering. Number 2, water deeply when the plant actually needs it. Number 3, pay extra attention to recently planted coneflowers. Number 4, avoid keeping the soil constantly saturated. Number 5, don't automatically fertilize because the plant looks less vigorous. Number 6, make sure your coneflowers receive appropriate sunlight. Number 7, keep aggressive weeds under control. Number 8, maintain reasonable airflow and spacing. Number 9, deadhead selectively if you want more flowers. Number 10, leave some flower heads for seeds and wildlife. And number 11, don't cut healthy plants completely down just because some flowers have faded. What if your coneflower looks bad this August? Don't panic. Start with the basics. Check the soil. Look at the weather. Examine the sunlight. Look for crowding. Look at the plant's age. Think about whether it was recently transplanted, and consider whether what you're seeing is simply normal late summer aging. This process prevents you from treating the wrong problem. For example, if the soil is bone dry, fertilizer won't solve the immediate issue. If the soil is constantly saturated, adding more water obviously won't help. If a tree has shaded the plant, fertilizer won't replace missing sunlight. The solution should match the problem. The most important question. Whenever you're unsure about your coneflower, ask yourself one simple question. What does the plant need right now? Not what the plant needed in May, not what another gardener's plant needs, not what a gardening product advertisement says it needs. What does your plant need right now? That question encourages you to observe your actual garden rather than following a rigid schedule. And that is one of the biggest steps towards becoming a better gardener. Don't overwork your garden. There's another reason I love this approach. It saves time. You don't need to spend hours every week cutting, feeding, spraying, and watering a hardy perennial that is already growing well. Instead, you can focus your energy on the plants that actually need attention. Your coneflowers can become one of the lower maintenance parts of your garden. Give them the right location, maintain reasonable soil moisture, keep serious competition under control, watch for genuine problems, and let them grow. Preparing for fall. As August gradually gives way to the next season, your coneflowers will begin changing. Some flowers will fade, some seed heads will mature, the foliage will eventually begin changing as the plant moves toward dormancy. You don't need to force that process. Let the plant complete its seasonal cycle. If you enjoy a tidy garden, you can eventually remove selected stems at an appropriate time. If you prefer a wildlife-friendly garden, you may choose to leave more standing through the colder months. There is no single perfect garden. The best approach depends on what you want your garden to accomplish. The wildlife benefit. This is what makes coneflowers such an excellent choice for a naturalistic garden. They're not simply decorative. Their flowers can provide resources for pollinating insects. Their mature seed heads can provide resources for birds. Their stems and remaining structure can contribute to the garden's habitat. And their perennial growth means you don't have to replant them every year. That's a lot of value from one plant. So when you look at a coneflower in August, don't just see a flower. See a small ecosystem. The biggest lesson for new gardeners. If you're new to gardening, there's one lesson I hope you take away from this video. You don't have to control everything. Gardening isn't about forcing plants to behave exactly the way you want every day. It's about understanding what plants naturally need and creating conditions where they can succeed. The more you observe, the less you have to guess. And the less you guess, the less likely you are to overwater, over-fertilize, over-prune, or unnecessarily disturb your plants. So here's the rule I want you to remember every August. Observe first, act second. See dry soil? Water appropriately. See a spent flower? Decide whether you want another bloom or a seed head. See a weed? Remove it if it's competing with your plant. See a healthy plant? Leave it alone. See an actual problem? Investigate before treating it. That simple mindset can save you a tremendous amount of time, money, and frustration. Final thoughts. Your coneflower doesn't need to look perfect in August. It doesn't need every flower removed. It doesn't need constant fertilizer. It doesn't need to be watered every single day. And it doesn't need to be cut to the ground simply because summer is moving forward. What it needs is a suitable growing environment and thoughtful care. Give it sunlight. Give it appropriate moisture. Give its roots well-drained soil. Give it enough space. Remove serious competition. Watch the plant. And allow it to participate in the natural rhythm of the season. That's the secret many gardeners miss. Outro. So the next time you walk past your coneflowers this August, don't immediately reach for the pruning shears. Stop for a moment and look closely. Look at the fresh flowers. Look at the fading ones. Look for bees and butterflies. Look at the developing seed heads. Feel the soil. Look at the surrounding plants. Ask yourself what your coneflower actually needs. Because sometimes the most important thing you can give a plant isn't another product or another treatment. Sometimes it's simply the right conditions and a little patience. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new about August coneflower care, make sure you subscribe to Daily Garden Gate for more practical gardening tips, seasonal growing advice, and simple ways to make your garden healthier and more productive. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you deadhead your coneflowers in August, or do you leave the seed heads for birds and wildlife? Tell us what you do in your garden, because your experience might help another gardener watching this video. Thanks for spending part of your day with Daily Garden Gate. Keep observing, keep learning, keep growing. And remember, the best gardeners aren't the ones who do the most. They're the ones who learn to understand what their plants actually need. Until next time, keep your hands in the soil and your garden growing.